Hello, this is the Freed. In this video, will be focused on Amara. This build is called, to me, the Elemental Goddess build. The theme around this build is to dish out as much elemental damage as possible, and to heal from the elemental damage as well, and to dish out elemental energy balls on hits with the astral projection ability, called Phase Cast. In our case, we're using the Deliverance modification. So to start, we get 5 points into Do Harm. This grants us 10 rush stacks max, and we get action skill damage per stack, for a total of 45% if you were to get 10 kills. It increases our action skill damage, which deals elemental damage. In our case, we are running Shock, as it is our strongest element in general. From there, we get 5 points into Violent Tapestry, which gives us elemental damage chance increase per stack. 3% per stack, 15% total, 20 seconds. So we'll be dishing out more elemental damage in the form of status effects as well as elemental damage per kill. Next, we get 5 points into Restless for increased cooldown on the elemental ability. Having increased cooldown will allow us to use it more and dish out the damage faster. At that point, you will have access to Soul Sap, which is Amara's main form of healing. It will give you 30% per skill damage dealt, and since we're using Shock, we'll be able to dish out 50% when we get the bonuses later on, for quite a whopping amount of health. I think it would be wise to run a shield that has a lot of health instead of shield, to get the full benefit of this. From there, we get Ascendant, which gives Soul Sap the lifesteal bonus I just mentioned, up to 50%. It also provides bonuses for other abilities. I do not believe I am using any of these abilities, but if you do, you will be getting increased bonuses listed here. From there, we get the Alteration mod for it, that makes it so that every time you damage an enemy or object, the projection releases a homing elemental projectile that triggers her action skill elemental effect on enemies, which in our case is Shock. So you'll dish out even more elemental damage, getting even more healing, and dealing even more damage for an infinite chain of elemental destruction. From there, we get 3 points in the Laid Bare, which makes enemies take increased damage from all sources after being damaged by your action skill, which you'll be using often. With more damage, you'll do more elemental damage, which will make you heal more, which will make you do the damage more, and the rush stacks will keep going up, and you will keep getting them back quickly. Then we get 1 point into From Rest, which gives us a little fire rate and charge time on certain guns. This is mostly to get to the next tree. It's not completely necessary. From there, we get 3 points into Remnant, which adds to our damage significantly. Whenever you get a kill with a gun or action skill, a homing projectile comes out that deals her elemental skill damage, which in our case is Shock. So you'll have elemental homing projectiles in addition to your regular damage flying everywhere, both on kills and on hit. It says they do 26 damage. We'll see how much that turns out to be. And if you do an overkill, you get even more damage. So if they had very low health and you just nuked them with a rocket launcher, that's going to be a very powerful projectile. And then we get 3 points into Awakening. Amara's rush stacks gain increased effectiveness. So all your rush stacks are better than they already were by 30% in every way. And our final ability is Avatar. You can use your action skill once on each cooldown. So you essentially get the action skill twice per each cooldown. You can use it whenever you want, up until the point it cools down. In addition, you get increased max rush stacks of 10, doubling your potential damage if you manage to get it up to 20 kills. And if her action skill kills an enemy, it refunds half of her rush stacks. So if you are devastatingly effective with this build, you can just keep the chain going of destruction and healing with elemental damage. Now, since we're mostly running shock, I think it would be wise to have very powerful shock weapons and a couple alternate weapons just in case shock is not very helpful. From there, we move on to the second skill tree to get the remainder amount of points. We get 5 points into Anima. Our status effects deal increased damage over time and have increased duration. And our action skill status effect deals further damage. So the status effect damage is up by 40%, the status effect damage is up by 20%. You get the idea. Even more elemental damage, even more healing, even more efficiency and destruction with elemental damage. From there, we get 5 points into Steady Hands, increasing weapon handling and accuracy. This will be useful for making you more accurate, which will make you do more damage. If the weapon is like a shotgun or an inaccurate machine gun, it'll add up. But it's mostly to get further into the tree. From there, to get 5 points into Tempest. This is what makes shock damage so much stronger. You get 20% more shock damage and 30% everything else. So you get a total of 50% shock and 30% everything else. So you'll deal much more damage, making you do even further healing as well as more kills, more elemental damage. From there we get Illuminated Fist, which allows your melee itself to deal elemental damage and convert it into her action skill element, which in our case is shock, mostly. So you can deal your damage even further in another method. Then we get Deep Well. Amara gains increased magazine size with elemental weapons. If it's an elemental weapon, which all of ours should be, you get 20% magazine size. Then we get 3 points into Catharsis. Whenever our Amara triggers an elemental effect on an enemy, and that enemy dies, they explode, dealing her elemental attuned damage, which is shock for us, along with any other element that is currently inflicted upon that enemy, and it has a short cooldown. So now we cause explosions with our element when we get kills. If you combine everything together, you'll have elemental explosions, elemental homing projectiles, lots of lifesteal, and it's just a chain of destruction. Sounds very efficient, and you could just keep yourself well stabilized, both for health and for shock damage, and damage in general. And that completes the build. This is the Freed. Hope you like it, and I'll be signing out.